Well, good evening, everyone. It is just after 7:30 on a Wednesday evening, which for now means it can only be one thing. It's our sports test webinar. Firstly, I'm going to apologise for last week. A bit of a technical issue, so we didn't come live to you last week. So we're here today. This is going to be my last webinar until autumn. Greatly, things have started moving again, and I'm able to start testing. And obviously, with the testing workload and coaching, I am struggling to give you my time and my attention and everything I would like to do in terms of telling you all about training and so on and so forth through these webinar series. This evening, I am specifically talking about training, and we've used the term training with age, but I want people to realize this is about young and old. So it's not just about old and wrinkly or anything else like that. And I got, so it's about everybody, and it's about what's right for you. So I'm going to start off with a couple of bits of housekeeping. So for those of you that are new to Zoom, I personally prefer, if you've got a question, please fire it to me. Please use the Q&A button to fire that question to me. So that I will try and answer it either as we're going along, or I will make myself a note that I can answer it at the end of the seminar as we've got to the end. So I'll have some time for questions afterwards. If it's just sort of chatty, you want to send something around to each other, please use the chat. I will look at the chats, but I'm going to try and specifically focus on the Q&As that you send me. If you find tonight useful, please go and visit Ko-fi, that's ko-fi.com/sportstest, and buy me a coffee to say thanks. As hopefully the lean period is going to stop now, because I can get back in the lab and start testing, so isn't that wonderful? Anyway, so let's move on swiftly. So I think most of you know who I am. I'm Dr. Gary Palmer. I run Sports Test, and I have done for absolutely ages. I'll flick through these first few slides. And tonight I'm going to do my best to run to time. I'm going to do my best to keep it to under 45 minutes or 45 minutes plus a few questions anyway. So say I'm Dr. Gary Palmer. I've got an undergraduate degree from West Sussex Institute in Chichester, a PhD in exercise physiology from Cape Town. I've taught sports science at Kingston University, and then went on to become a reader at Wolverhampton. But I had enough of all of that, and so I became Sports Test. And I've done a huge amount of stuff, and I work with athletes from Olympic, World Championship athletes, right through to complete novices and complete individuals, just trying to do their best and get through their, whatever it is, their charity ride, their fun ride, whatever it might be. Oh, so I've had great experience working with people from young right through to old. And tonight is all about looking at how we can help you out. And I was at the park the other day, and this happened, and it happened again, and it happened again, and it happened again. And the circuit around the park, I was taking the kids, and we were at the park for a good hour or so. This young chap continued to run laps around the park for at least 45 minutes. And I was impressed. I actually went over to him. I don't think he knew I took the video, but I actually went over to him and said, I'm really impressed with the way that you're running. And he said something along the lines to me, well, I try my hardest. So it got me thinking, will I still be able to run? So, let's can I still keep moving? And from experience, we are in a situation where there are quite a few ex-runners I know, by the time they get to 50, 55, 60, switch to cycling. It's a little bit easier on joints, it's a little bit easier on ligaments, and they still can keep the cardiovascular workload going. And it's absolutely fantastic. So will I still be able to run? Will you still be able to run? That's a question that obviously as I get older, and I made no bones about it, and some of my good Nigerian friends are online tonight. They and IB, you'll need to post what you say, but I'm 50 this year. I'm turning 50, and it's sort of welcome to the club of turning 50. Now I want to know I can keep going, and if I can keep going, how quickly can I keep going? So this chap to me was absolutely flying around the park, and it was really, really impressive to see. But what happens to my performance? What happens to your performance as we get older? Now, to a certain extent, there's some information out there about what happens, and I tried to use, and those of you that come to see me, I like the Daniels tables. It tells me so much, and I could try and open Excel now, and I could try and talk you through, and it's just going to blow my mind tonight. But I like to look at Daniel's tables. We can look at impact on weight, we can look at impact on age, we can look at impact on temperature, we can look at impact on different running distance. Now, this is run specific, but we can take those inferences and use them for running, use them for triathlon, use them for swimming, use them for whatever you're doing. And particularly what we see is, and if we look at this, and I just plugged in a data point at 36 years old, and I plugged in an athlete at 25 years old and said, right, what happens to that athlete across the ages? So actually, using Daniel's tables, we see that sort of between 25, and I've got a crib sheet here, so I can actually snake down at my notes. At 25, this individual is capable of running a 36-minute 10K. By 30, they've slowed to a 36:03. So in that 5 years, they've only lost 3 seconds. If we bring them back down to a 20-year-old here, they're 24 seconds slower. They're running 36:24, and we drop them down to a 15-year-old at the left-hand side here. And I didn't go any younger than that because I don't think it's appropriate. We're looking at 38:58. So, you know, there's a couple of guys in my local running club at the moment between 10 and 16 who are absolutely flying along over 5K. And really what I'd say to them is, as a sort of 10 to 15-year-old, they've got another 10 years of improving and then 5 years of staying sort of fairly stable before things start, in the minds of a lot of people, going a little bit wrong. Now, that 36-minute 10K here, by the time you've reached 35, you've only lost 32 seconds. So in 10 years, you've lost 32 seconds. By the time you've got to 40, however, we're now starting to fall off. And by 40 here, the prediction is that athlete, Ranger athletes, is going to be running 37 minutes 48. So you've lost 1 minute and 48. So from 25 to 40, you've lost about 1 minute and 48. As things move on, by the time that athlete has hit the 50-year-old classification, we're now down at nearly 41 minutes. Up to 60, we're looking at 44 minutes 40, so you've lost nearly 9 minutes. Up to 70, and I've actually on my crib sheet, I've got 10-minute, 5-year boundaries, but up to 70 here, we're looking at 49 minutes and 10. And as an 80-year-old, we're looking at, you've slowed from a 36-minute capability as a 25-year-old up to a 58-minute here. So, you know, there is a drop-off. I would say that this is fairly linear, probably until we get to the point of around about 70, and then it seems to just taper off that a little bit more. So we're looking at, you are going to slow down. We know you're going to slow down. We're seeing it in so many other people, but why do we slow down? You know, what's going on? Well, we look at the impact of aging, and during early middle age, probably where I am, I'm probably a bit older than early middle age, I'm hitting the 50s, but between sort of 35 and 50, physical activity in the population generally declines, and COVID for me has made things worse, being daddy daycare and so on and so forth. So there might be points in your life that things change, but generally over that period of 10 to 15, 5 to 15 years, there's a 5 to 10 kilo increase in body fat. Now, obviously that increase in body fat, and if you've seen my seminars before, every kilo that we can lose is worth about 2 minutes over marathon distance. So it's worth 30 seconds over 10K distance. So if we're trying to get weight loss, so go back to the weight loss seminar and look at how we can change that. But that decline in physical activity continues onto old age. So, you know, people slow down, they're not so active. They're a lot more sedentary, and that sedentary level and a change in hormones and a change in diet and everything just slowing down, people will just tend to increase body fat by 5 to 10 kilos. The next thing that we know is your maximum heart rate declines. And generally we would suggest that your maximum heart rate declines by about 1 beat per year initially, and then after that we're seeing it continue to decline. Now, again, that's a generalization, and it's suggested as a result of that, as a result of cardiovascular efficiency, your maximum oxygen uptake also declines by about 1% per year. So this isn't really good listening at the moment. And finally, the mass of fast twitch fibers also diminishes, and where you need to produce the power from high intensity exercise, those fast twitch fibers decline sharply between the age of 30 and 40 by about 3% per year. Once you've hit 40, it continues to decline by about 1% per year afterwards. So again, looking at what you're trying to do and looking at looking at what, my brain's just gone for a second, looking at your activity, looking at your discipline, and previously in other seminars I pulled in the slide to start with that gets people to think about what they're doing. Looking at that activity, looking at that discipline, we're looking and seeing that is going to have an impact on performance. Now, Debbie's rightly, and I haven't specifically gone genders, Debbie, this is generally about the same. Now, ladies, females don't seem to hit that same decline quite so severely initially, but later on it does catch up with them. So we tend to find that 30 to 40 is the classification that hits for most males, but females tend to see that happen just a little bit later. And again, we've got the female hormones, and we've also potentially got menopause coming along at anywhere between 40 and 55. Generally, that can act as an impact as well. So I'm trying to simplify things. I'm trying to keep things just nice and sensible at the moment. But yeah, thanks for picking me up on that. Really, really important. I'm just going to done that. So I've done that one. So I've lost that. Great stuff. So clearly we're in a situation that, depending on the discipline that you're trying to do, those three major factors all have an impact on physical performance. And this final one, particularly on the discipline that you're doing. So if you're purely an endurance athlete and you're, let's say, focusing on running marathon, half marathon as a runner, the loss in fast twitch muscle fiber isn't going to be quite so important to you. But if you're going to do something like mountain biking, if you're going to do something like cycling where you're crit racing or hitting mountains in explosive nature, or you're playing a team sport, a hockey, a football, where you need explosive bursts, come that age of 30, you will find your performance is dropping off just that little bit more. So as I say, those three factors, the increase in body fat, the drop in peak heart rate, the drop in VO2 max, and then the loss of muscle fiber type are all going to major impact on your performance. But what I want to say is, it's not necessarily all bad news, because this age-related decline is generally greater in non-athletes than athletes. And as you age, if you can exercise actively and do that vigorous activity, you will get the same benefits of training as a younger person would do. So we've got to think about this. And at the moment, I'm focusing specifically on the older athlete, but we could potentially look at the younger athlete as well and say there are phases through a younger athlete's development that we want to focus on strength work, we want to focus on endurance, and we want to get those training phases right. And so in the older athlete, we might think, lots of endurance exercise is really good. And I remember one of my PhD supervisors, John Hawley, who's research chair at IRMIT in Melbourne, said to me about his father, and I picked it up with Hugh Porter, the cyclist, and I used to go out riding. I see Hugh in the lanes, and I'd struggle to catch him. And John said to me one day about his dad. He said his dad could go out and run for hour upon hour upon hour, but was losing the strength to pull himself out of the chair. Just to physically lift his body out of the chair. Send him out for a run, it wasn't a problem at all. And I said the same to Hugh, and I was chatting to Hugh, and I said, Hugh, you're flying along on the bike. I said, but I bet you're struggling to get out of the chair. And he said, you've been talking to Anita. And it's exactly that, is that we've got to look at different phases of development, what we need to do to try and get the benefits. But by doing activity, rather than just going and facing, I'm getting older, I can't, forget that. Or rather than thinking, I'm young, I'm going to develop, forget that. We've got to be focused in what we do to get the best of our body. So that impact of aging can actually be suppressed by training. And this study was really, really interesting to me. So this is track 2013 in Journal of Applied Physiology. And they looked at 9 athletes, and they called them lifelong athletes. And in fact, one of them, they were all cross-country skiers, but one of them was an Olympian. And they found in this group of 9 athletes with an average age of 81 that they had a functional capacity far in excess of what was typical for a typical 80-year-old. So they compared the lifelong athletes, as they called them, versus the non-athletes. And they found for that group of 9 athletes that they studied, their aerobic capacity, their frailty was all significantly greater, and therefore they thought there was a lower risk for mortality and lower risk for disability by having those individuals carrying on exercise. Now, so one of them was previously an Olympic level athlete. So these guys were good, strong athletes, younger athletes, but they'd actually carried on their training through. And it's so much so that when they looked and reported on the VO2 max of the octogenarians, the 80-year-old lifelong athletes, they were finding that their VO2 max was comparable to non-endurance athletes of 40 years old. So these guys on average were looking at a VO2 max in excess of 40 mils per kilogram, despite the fact that they were 81. Whereas a typical male is you're probably looking at, well, as an 80-year-old, the studies they were looking at were having VO2 maxes in relative terms of body weight, 21 to 25. So nearly twice the VO2 max of the comparative age group. But typically, if I was looking at a typical 40-year-old that's a healthy individual, but not necessarily exercising, I expect a VO2 max of 35 to 40. So, at the age of 80, these guys are able to exercise, able to use their lung capacity, able to use their cardiovascular system, as well as a 40-year-old. So, as we get older, and despite the fact that we look at that line going up from annuals that I showed you and performance dropping off, you can suppress that. As a whole, your VO2 max will drop. But the question really is are you operating anywhere near your VO2 max? And the chances are most people aren't. So we've got to look at that impact of aging, and we've got to look at it in a really, really positive way. So what I want to start off by saying is certainly if you're getting older, if you're older than me, if you're thinking, crikey, I'm hitting 35, I'm on the way down, all is not lost. We can aid your performance by looking at a number of different factors. We can aid your performance by looking at training sensibly. We can aid your performance by assuring sensible recovery. We can aid your performance by improving nutrition. And there are other factors that we want to build in as well. Now, again, at this point, I'm going to say, this is where I talk to you about whether you're 12, whether you're 15, whether you're 22, whether you're 37, whether you're 49, whether you're 65, whether you're 83. These factors effectively are all the same. Every individual, and you guys out there, and I can't see you at the moment, but you guys out there are completely individuals. And we've got to look at you as such. And so when I pick up training manuals, and I was going to put a page in from somebody that's very well known, focused the book on triathlon training for the over 50s. And I'm like, but why is it different? It shouldn't be different. We know there's an aging process that goes on, and we know that aging has an impact on you, but the principles of whether you're 15 or 50 should be the same training principles. And so just as a reminder, I'm saying to you, the first thing is, what are your priorities? Now, as a 15-year-old, or say go the other end of the scale, as a 65-year-old, rest and recovery should be number one priority. Now, okay, we'll use this as a daft example. Athlete here thinks their kit's far more important than the body. No, your body is important. Your body is your temple. The better you can look after your body, the better the rest, the recovery, the training, the balance from training to sleep, the better nutrition, the better strategies that you look at, we're going to get you better results. So we've got to look at you as being an individual rather than a generic. And so the concept of, oh, you're over 50s, if we're going to periodize you, we need to be working on a 14-day periodization rather than a 21-day periodization, in my mind, is totally nonsense. Today in the lab, and I'm actually almost should pull the photo up, I had a 65, 66-year-old cyclist in the lab who is still riding very, very close to a 1 hour, 25-mile time trial. We'll go on out TT bike, he will kick my ass. I can't ride that quick at the moment, and yet this chap is a good chunk older than me. Now, what I do with that individual is the same as I would do with a 15 or an 18-year-old developing individual. I look at how they're responding to their training. I look at what their priorities are, what they're lacking in their fitness, and how we need to develop to get them to improve, as opposed to saying, here's a generic plan that fits everybody. So with that in mind, we then also look at strengths and weaknesses. And I mean, this is a cycling one I do a running one, a cycling one, a triathlon one, and we look at various different aspects. So, from a cycling point of view, where are you strong? Road racing, where are you weak? Road racing sportives type thing. Do you time trial? No, you don't. Where are your strengths and weaknesses in off-road racing, off-road riding? Right, Neil's just popped something up as a question, but I think it's a really useful comment. So, Neil, and I'll let Neil know, and you'll all work this out yourself. Neil's just 50 not so long ago. Has been coming in to see me. I've coached him for quite a while, on and off. He's been to World European Duathlon Champs. We're looking at breaking that 3-hour marathon target as a 50-year-old if a marathon ever happens again. And Neil's commented, maximum heart rate using 220 minus his age would give him maximum heart rate 168. We did a treadmill test with him last week and we got him to 187. Why is that? It's because he's an individual, and maximum heart rate is related to the size of the heart compared to the size of the body. So the formula of 220 minus your age has come from a study that was done in Loughborough many, many years ago. And it was a widespread of a population from elite hockey players right through to sort of people that lived in the local area. And the formula was 220 minus your age plus or minus 15. So actually, Neil is well outside of that 15 beat range of either side. There's a 30 beat range, so the midpoint there, and you'd be 15 beats of either side of that midpoint. Neil is outside of that with a max predicted 168, but actually measured at 187. But that means that in terms of training and in terms of training zones, rather than predicting and guessing, we can actually see what's going on. And from that point of view, when we come and look at these strengths and weaknesses, we can see what strengths and weaknesses he's got, and we can direct his training as appropriately as possible for him, with the time that he's got available, with everything else, with how he recovers. And again, I'll bring that in with Neil, and it happens in different classifications with different athletes I've got. I've got a 20-year-old female who also works shift work, but Neil works an 8-day shift pattern where he's working, 2 nights in every 8. Well, I've got a 22, 24-year-old female triathletes and exactly the same. I treat them both as individuals. One recovers from the night shift better than the other. It doesn't matter which way round it is, but one recovers better from the night shift than the other. One's quite happy if they're doing a day shift to actually train alongside of it. The other one's not. And you have to treat people as individuals, how they respond, how they cope, how they recover. So that's where we come to then. So what we need to look at is we need to structure your training program to your personal requirements. So yeah, I mean, I've got my photo of Seb here, and he's 8. I don't train him, I don't coach him. He goes to the local running club sometimes and he absolutely loves it. But at the moment, that's about enjoyment. But there are things with development in young athletes that to a certain extent should be the same in an older athlete. So for my mind, a young athlete's development isn't about pushing them. It's not about developing cardiovascular endurance or strength, although there are phases through an adolescent athlete as opposed to a young athlete that we would want to work more strength or we'd want to work more endurance. But actually in a young athlete, it's about enjoyment, and enjoyment has got to be the priority. And it's maybe a little bit about technique, because at this age, picking up bad habits with technique, good body position, good arm position, good foot posture, good position on a bike, good flexibility, good range of motion, we should be in the best possible situation. So it's about structuring the program to your personal requirements. And it doesn't matter whether you're 8 or 80, it's getting those requirements right for what you need. So really effective training, and I'll go through this really quickly. It's about adequate volume. It's about getting the right duration for your training session. It's about making sure the intensity is right for you and right for what the session is trying to achieve. So I'll come back to it time and time again. There are so many people, and I saw someone in the lab this morning as a runner who was in exactly the same boat. His easy sessions were not easy enough, and therefore his hard sessions weren't hard enough because he was constantly fatigued. He thought he was doing an easy run, and yet he was too close to metabolic threshold, and therefore going out and doing a 5K, he's got steam coming out of his ears. So it's about getting that intensity right. It's about, as probably a 25 to 85-year-old athlete, probably 25 to 65-year-old athlete, it's about sport specificity. So it's doing the sport that you're trying to train for. At the other extremes, at the younger athlete, it's about getting that athlete to do lots of different activity, lots of things that they enjoy. And again, as an older athlete, depending on what you're trying to do, What we're really trying to achieve with the older athletes is they might not be able to go out and run 5 days a week. So can we put some cross training in? You know, can we do some cycling work? Can we do some rowing? Can we do some weights? What else can we bring in? So it's about having that sort of funnel process where, as a younger athlete, we start really, really wide and we don't necessarily drill down into the sport or the discipline. We come through the athletic career and we drill down into the sport specificity. And then as you become an older athlete and you still want to compete, and you still want to enjoy, we've maybe got to widen that funnel again so you're not quite so specific. Building into all of that, we're looking at recovery as well. Now, I could talk about this, as you will find out, for about 2 hours. I did a seminar on this 4 weeks, 6 weeks ago. So please go to YouTube. So youtube.com/sports test Joe will hopefully post the link in the webinar chat. Go to the previous seminars I've done. I've done a whole load of seminars over this COVID lockdown, and I really hope that you'll find some stuff on there that's really, really beneficial to you. So go and have another look at that. Yes, Charlie. So Charlie, and I don't know if you guys get to see this. So Charlie's just asked me, is cross training more important as we age? Yes, it is. And it's for, you're right, it's for general health, and you can train on the bike. And that was the example I said about Hugh Porter. You know, Hugh's sitting on the bike for 2, 3, 4 hours at a time, banging along still, you know, ex-pro, 18 miles an hour. You're struggling to catch him in the lanes. But when he comes to get out of his chair after the coffee stop, he hasn't got that muscular force, the bone density. And this is one of the factors, and I'll talk about this very briefly later on, but as you raised it, you know, I'll do my usual, I'll talk about it now and go off on a tangent. So we know, and as I mentioned earlier, we know certainly beyond the age of 30, we start to lose that strength in muscle fiber. And there's also been quite a few studies that extensively show that in an older athlete, in 70-year-olds plus, doing resistance training, doing strength work, doing weights, will actually maintain bone density, will stop the drop-off in bone density. That has to be applied with good, sensible nutrition, though. There's no point in going to the gym and trying to get resistance work to increase bone density if your nutrition's not good or if you're not looking after yourself. So those two things go hand in hand. But definitely cross-training is good for core, it's good for posture, it's good for muscular strength. You know, it means you're not likely to be so aching and creaking and everything else, but actually it does give you that strength for normal day-to-day capacity. So whilst you might have heart and lungs of an ox, it's actually about having the joints and the tendons and the ligaments that actually allow those to work together. So it's about being really, really sensible in what we're doing. So hopefully that's answered that. I'll come back onto that as well, Charlie, in a short while. I'm just going to have a little play around with that. Thank you very much. So yeah, please go back to the YouTube seminars that I've done previously and have a look at specifically training and overtraining and those sort of aspects. So there's my mouse gone, there we are. And it's about this concept. I keep banging on about it. It is about training smarter, not harder. It's up that side as well. Train smarter, not harder. Know what your training zones are. Use your training zone sensibly. If it is an easy day, take it as an easy day. Now, I very rarely, and I'll put a caveat to this, I very, very rarely test athletes younger than 16. And my rationale behind that is that if an athlete comes to me younger than 16, it's not the athlete that wants to know what's going on. It's the parent that wants to know what's going on. And I'm very, very scared. I've seen it too many times with pushy parents, that a parent is bringing their child to me to be tested because they want to get that extra mile. Now, I will stack my stake out at this point, and you know, I've seen many athletes, 13, 14, 15-year-olds, who I believe for the right reasons are coming to see me. And with those guys, it's about, right, when you're going out and training and we've got that Garmin on your bike, it isn't about what your average speed can be or what your average power can be. It is, are you using your heart rate effectively? Are you actually making sure that when coach or mum or dad or mentor or whoever's looking after your training is saying, right, you can go out for a run today, you can go out for a bike today, but keep it easy. It's about understanding what that heart rate is that is easy for that individual. So it's about being smart with what they're doing. It's not about saying, oh, look, we can improve VO2 max here or we can reduce body weight there. It's about using these numbers effectively. And that's the same with, you know, an athlete that's 25, 35, 65, 85. It's about understanding what your training zones are. And rather than going, as Neil's pointed out before, let's take 220 minus my age and use that and then be miles off from where we need to be. We want to look at it as being, right, let's get the best from you. Let's get the most from you. How do we push you forward by finding what's right for you and what zones are right for you? And then we take that stage further. And again, I've gone through all of this on the training seminar, so I want to just go through this really, really briefly. I've already talked, I've just looked at my watch, crikey, I've already been talking far too long. Get a clear focus for every single training session. And again, it doesn't matter whether you're 18, not 8, because an 8-year-old should be having fun. It doesn't matter whether you're 18 or 80. It's about getting focused. James, as you get older, it's more time to train. I get you need to train smart, but if you've got time, is it worth maximizing the hours you put in? Again, there's a balance. And so one of the things I want to come on to, James, is it's all about recovery. And one of the things I'd say to you is that we use that term training very, very generically. So what's your definition of training? And is that going out and spending more time on the bike? Is it going out and spending more time running? Or are there other activities that you could be doing in that time that would optimize your performance? So I'm going to sort of half answer that. I'm going to come back to that later on and remind me. I've actually put that I've answered, but I'm going to come back to it later on. I'm going to get to a couple of slides much later on once I've spoken to you about recovery, and I want to try and remember that one and come back to it. Right, so have a focus. And so it doesn't matter whether you're 18 or 80, have a focus to what you're going to do today. What is the purpose of today's training session? If you know what that purpose is, it becomes far more valuable to you. From that perspective, it's then we can then use that focus to make sure you have hard days and easy days. Is this a recovery day? And a recovery day might be a complete rest day. Coming back to James's idea, right, it's a recovery day, it's an easy day. Okay, I've got a bit of time. I'm going to ride, I'm going to run down to the coffee shop, and I'm going to have an hour sat reading the paper, and I'm going to just chill and come back home. Or, right, I've got 2 hours today. You know what? I'm going to go and do a yoga session. I'm going to do some Pilates. I'm going to do some core work. I'm going to go to the gym and do some strength and conditioning work. What can you do that builds in? So it might be that you've got an easy day because you've had a hard training session the day before. Now that easy day might be, I'm going to go do some weights, but because I was running or cycling yesterday, I can go and work up a body. And so it's trying to think about how those hard days and easy days fit in. And if you've got that extra wealth of time, it's using that wealth of time wisely rather than blindly. And again, we come onto this concept of targeted sessions. Target your sessions to what your strengths and weaknesses are. So again, Charlie, come back to Charlie. Charlie, if you know that you've got the cardiovascular system of an ox, which I know you have, but we're worried about bone density and losing muscle density, losing muscle mass, we put in targeted sessions, which are now all about doing gym work to make sure that you maintain what your weakness is becoming. So that's where we build that in. Again, mix the intensity, mix the effort, keep it interesting, keep it challenging. Potentially, as both a young athlete and an old athlete, we need to keep those exercise intensities quite high. As a young athlete, I want the young athlete to avoid doing hour upon hour upon hour of endurance exercise, because it's not going to do growth and development any good. So we've got to have a nice mix of intensity. As an older athlete, again, depending on the need, we don't want you to do hour upon hour upon hour upon hour of low intensity exercise, because we need to do high intensity exercise to really push you towards VO2 max, to stimulate the capacity of the lungs, to stimulate the capacity of the heart, and actually develop some muscular strength alongside of it by doing some lactate tolerance and above lactate threshold work. So it's mixing that around. Have those unstructured days, but don't make every day unstructured. So keep it enjoyable. With the kids, it's training. With the young athletes, it's training with their mates, it's training with others. With older athletes, it's having that unstructured day where, you know what, I'm going to stop and take a photo of the view. I'm going to stop and have a coffee, a stretch, whatever it might be. I'm going to chat to the vicar outside the church, whatever floats your boat. It's having that unstructured, enjoyable day. And again, it's about recovery days. And I'm going to come on to that now. Recovery days for both the young athlete and the old athlete are absolutely essential. For me, a recovery day is more important, far more important than a training day in itself. The problem is I can't give you, as a 40-year-old, you should be doing X hours a week. As a 24-year-old, you should be doing this. As a 74-year-old, you should be doing that. Everyone is individual. How many rest and recovery days you need is completely unique to you. I was speaking to a lady yesterday who was taking effectively 1 recovery day in every 14. I'm like, no, that's not enough. And most people I work with, I will go, right, recovery days. We'll start off with 2 recovery days a week. And then we move forward and we keep focused. So that's really what we want to be looking at there. And it is about improving your recovery. And I had to throw this photo of Becky in, and that was post Coventry half marathon. Whenever the Coventry half marathon was, it would have been not last year, 18 months ago perhaps. And so, you know, maybe an ice cream's not the best recovery, but we've got to enjoy ourselves as well. And we've got to stay focused. We've got to try and keep that balance, keep that enjoyment level if we can. Ian's just popped up something about how do you stay motivated in training. For many people, staying motivated in training is about having goals. And it might be about setting, you know, a personal best, a 5-year personal best. I mean, I struggled for many years, and I'm never, well, maybe I can. I still think I can. But, you know, back in my heyday, I was running a 32-minute 10K off the bike. I can't even run a 36-minute 10K at the moment. But it's, can I reset my goals? Can I get below 40? Yes, I can. Great. Now, brilliant. I've got below 40. I'm starting to, you know, hit top 5s in my age group. Like, can I get top 3 in my age group? Can I look at doing something else? So it's finding external goals. You know, again, there was something that probably built in here. I don't know if Andy Lane is on tonight. If he is, I'm sure he'll chip in. I know he shared something I posted earlier. Andy's an absolutely great sports psychologist. And one of the things that Andy said to me when I was struggling a few years ago is he said, make stuff process orientated, Ian, as opposed to goal orientated. So rather than thinking, you know, I want to run that 36-minute 10K, or I want to ride that hour on the bike, or that hour and 10, or whatever it might be, I want to finish X place in my age group. No, make it process orientated. So how many hours of training can I do this week? Great. How long can I stay in my heart rate zone? Great. Right now, what are my outcomes? Can I measure my outcomes? And if the outcomes are measurable, so am I riding at a lower heart rate? Am I riding at a faster speed? Am I running at a better cadence? Is my breathing rate better? Do I feel better? Do my legs not feel so sore? So we look at process orientated and outcome goals. And if we focus in that way and we see things moving forward, that really keeps us motivated. I think that's the way to look at it. So coming back to the recovery, again, we did a seminar on overtraining and recovery, a massive, and probably wasn't quite a mammoth, but it was nearly an hour. So, you know, please go back to YouTube and look at that and look at aspects. Just but briefly again, basic principles must apply here. And I've used here a couple of slides. I've used 6 slides from that presentation. So it does say about tools to aid onset of overtraining, but this is the same. It's about looking at recovery, and it doesn't matter, as I say, whether you're 18 or whether you're 80, these principles should be the same. Basic principles. Use your heart rate. Use your heart rate during training. Use your heart rate for resting. See how your body is responding for an output, whether it's a power output, whether it's a speed. So you've got a process of how your body's responding. Write a training diary. You know, keep an indication of diet, training, motivation, sleep patterns, nutrition. Put as much information in that training diary as possible. And the guys that share their training with me, because I coach them on Training Peaks, I say to them, you can't put too much information in that training diary. You know, I almost want to know, not quite when you last wiped your backside, but I almost want to know, you know, what you ate, what you slept, how you felt, because actually, whilst I know what's going on now, if we come to review this, and whether it's me as your coach, or you move to a different coach, or you do it yourself in 12 months' time, 5 years' time, you come to review it, what's worked, what hasn't worked, the more information in that training diary, the more effective it's going to be. So use that training diary. Why are you not recovering? It was 30 degrees outside, I wasn't sleeping properly, or I've got work stress going on. Now, you'll know that at the moment, you don't need to report it in your diary, but when you come to review it in 2, 3, 5 years' time, I was flying in that period. Oh, look, I was doing all those miles. Hang on a minute. Was that the period that COVID was on? So I was furloughed, so I had loads of time to recover. I can't replicate that block. So it's thinking about stuff like that. Continue to review your training responses. So I've just mentioned heart rate, look at power outputs, look at speeds, look at rate of perceived exertion. How am I feeling? How do my legs feel? What do I feel like when I get up in the morning? All of these things are crucial. But keep that program constantly changing. So, so many plans in a book, I think in my mind, fail because they don't constantly change. They're not responding to what you're doing. So you become stale with it. Every Wednesday night becomes a track night down at the club. Oh God, it gets tedious after all. Even though those sessions are changing, mix it up a bit, move things around, do something different. Go and run a park run if you're a marathon runner. If you're a marathon runner, go and jump on a bike. Do something different to keep it challenging, to keep you motivated and moving forward. I can't overemphasize, but I'm going to sweep over this, coming in to see me for some physiological assessment, of course, because we can really give you an awful lot of information from that. And there are sports psychologists that I can direct you to that can help you with psychological assessment as well if you need it. And then I've just moved something on here. Again, I can't overemphasize correct nutritional practices. And I've done 2 seminars on nutrition. I've done one on weight loss, where I spoke quite extensively. And this perhaps, bringing the comment back in is when we hit middle age, we gain 5 to 10 kilos of body fat. Go back and look at that. How do I lose body fat? How do I get optimal weight? Go back and listen to me for an hour there. But there was also another one that I did about nutrition pre, post, and during training. Go and follow optimal nutrition practices. You will find you will recover better. You recover better, you can train more. It doesn't matter, as I say, whether you're 18 or 80, those responses are the same. At this point, it doesn't matter whether you're 15 or 45. It's important that we learn this. And some of the best athletes that I feel I've worked with were a bunch of cyclists at the age of 15, 16 that I was able to implement a lot of this stuff with. And a group of 6 riders in South Africa that I worked with, 5 of the 6 of them went on to become national team riders. So it's taking this as a youngster and getting this in, so if you're sitting here as a parent and listening to this, take this on board for your youngster and see what they can do. And that for me is absolutely crucial. Now, Charlie, great. Another comment he's posted up. Charlie feels rubbish during a warm-up, possibly need for more recovery, which I've told him. Sometimes you feel rubbish, but then the other issue, Charlie, is that sometimes because you're chasing your tail, your warm down isn't good enough. And maybe as a slightly older athlete, we need to warm down. We need to flush that lactate out the muscle a little bit more. So we need to be really conscious about warming up properly. And I'm going to come on something else in a minute. I keep promising you about, and I was going to snip over it, but it's about warming up properly. It's about doing your session properly, and it's about warming down properly. But once you've warmed down properly, and you've done that bit of a stretch, you've done that bit of a loosener as you've climbed off your bike for Charlie's case, it's then making sure you've got the appropriate, recovery strategy, which might be, again, go to my overtraining seminar. It might be about putting on the compression tights. It might be about having, recovery shake, then eating normally. So it's factoring on all these things to give your body the best possible chance to recover. There he is again, Charlie. Done that one. Yeah, you've never been great at warm down. I know you haven't. I've seen your training peaks data. I won't tell them what you said next. When you said it comes in a pint glass, I'm guessing you're meaning a pint of potted prawns, Charlie, because I'm sure it wouldn't be anything else. Right, okay, so moving on. Remove all other external stresses where we possibly can. Now again, as a 15 to 18-year-old, we can't get rid of GCSEs and A-levels, so they're going to be there. But, remove other stresses as we can. As we get older and we move towards retirement, hopefully you won't have those stresses in life, but if you can reduce those stresses, that will have a massive impact on you. Right, the factors that I'm not going to go into tonight, because honestly, this isn't my bag. I work with some great strength and conditioning coaches, both here in the West Midlands. There's 2 or 3 people who I would direct you to here in the West Midlands. There's a great guy that I work with in the Channel Islands. For my Nigerian clients that are on tonight, if you've not spoken to Ed Wonder yet, why have you not spoken to Ed Wonder? Strength and conditioning as an older athlete, I cannot emphasize the importance of it. As a middle-aged athlete, I'm really, really bad. I don't find at the moment I'm having enough time to train myself. But my wife's just started another strength and conditioning program, and we can see already within 2 or 3 weeks the benefits of it. But I also remember as a 15-year-old, we used to do 1 or 2 nights of the week, we used to go and do a circuit class. And as a result of that, I was so much stronger, I was so much fitter. And when I did pick up light injuries, it was then the strength and conditioning could be diverted towards ensuring that the weakness I had became strength. So it doesn't matter, again, whether you're 8 to too young, but certainly by the time you're at 14, 15, right through to 85. So I'm going to say 14 to 94 in this case, you should be considering some strength and conditioning. Now, whether it's a plan that you do something 15 to 20 minutes each day, which might be coming back to James and you've got more time. What are you doing for core? What are you doing for posture? What are you doing for strength and conditioning? What are you doing in terms of resistance work? Those are the things that you can be doing whilst you're not training. Okay, so this is training, but it's not actually the training session. And so that's where we're starting to widen that portfolio of what you're going to fill your time with. As a younger athlete, you might be, stripped of time. And again, as I say, things get a bit compressed in the middle here for me. And I find that most athletes really, unless they're elite athletes between the age of probably 25 and 50, 55, are often time pressed. So we need to go, I'll get rid of some of the extra bits that would be really beneficial and focus on, 4 to 6 hours of really quality training. Yeah, James, strength and conditioning twice a week would be more than appropriate. But again, you can be backing that up. We're doing some core work, which I wouldn't really look at as strength and conditioning, almost 15 to 20 minutes, 3 days a week. So, you could do a true strength and conditioning session twice a week. And on 2 or 3 of the other days, you could be working core work and everything else. So that's the first point. David, I'm going to come on to your question in about 15 seconds. The next thing, which I think is overlooked, and it's overlooked in both the younger athlete, because the younger athlete thinks they don't need it, and the older athlete definitely needs it, but by that stage they're too creaky, is flexibility and mobility. Now, whether it's assisted in the terms of, you go to a physio, you go to a sports masseur that actually is able to rub out and get knots out and then actually bend and stretch you, or whether you've got a stretching plan and a mobility plan that you follow, I think for both young and old athletes alike, and us in the middle, those things shouldn't be overlooked, but a lot of people do. But it's finding what works for you. Now, again, there's no point in having, really, really, really bouncy hamstrings and flexible hamstrings if you're not looking after the quads and you're not looking after posture and upper body. So it's finding what works for you. Now, David's asked me if older athletes lose fitness more quickly than younger athletes during breaks like holidays and illnesses. And in theory, they shouldn't, but in practice, what we're looking at here is it's actually, if you're starting off with a higher level, you actually maintain that higher level much more effectively. If you're starting off with a lower level and you're not training so consistently, then, little breaks, sporadic breaks. So the thing that I bang on about, and I'm glad you've raised this, and I'm banging onto you about it all the time, is consistency in training is absolutely crucial. There's no point in doing a strength and conditioning session once a fortnight. It's not enough. It's got to be consistent. There's no point in going out and riding your bike once a fortnight or once a week, or going out and doing a 5-hour ride on a Sunday and being that exhausted that you then need to rest another 6 days before you ride again. So again, whether you're 18 or whether you're 88, it's about doing things consistently. It's about doing things frequently. And if you can do that training consistently and frequently, where it comes to breaks, for holidays, for illness, for injury, you will find you will bounce back much, much faster comparatively to somebody that's less fit than you. Now, again, repair processes, and this isn't my bag, and I probably at this point say, let's get a physio on board. Let's talk to a physio and see what a physio would say about repair processes. But I remember, my dad, oh crikey, many, many years ago, and I was tiny, I don't even remember this happening, but he fell 40 feet, smashed his ankles up to smithereens, and there was a mad surgeon from Harley Street that just happened to be in Jersey at the time and rebuilt his ankles with steel and plastic. And the one thing that I remember my dad always telling me is that most people didn't get on with that surgeon because they were asking him questions. And this is a typical runner's question, a typical cyclist question. When can I get back training? I'm injured. I'm ill. When can I start training again? And my dad apparently never once said to the surgeon, will I be able to walk again? How quickly will it be before I'm on my feet? How will I ever be able to run? Will I ever be able to walk up or downstairs again? He never once asked him those questions. And when he came to leave hospital after however many weeks, the surgeon basically thanked him for that and said, "I'm not God. I don't know the answers to these questions." And that's probably the one thing that, as a physiologist, people expect us to have all the answers. And the other thing I'd say as a physiologist, there are physiologists out there that purport to have all the answers. And if a physiologist or a coach tells you they've got all the answers, I don't think they are. I think they're a charlatan. Because as I said to you in other seminars that I've done before, if I could tell you how long it takes you to recover from this particular training session, as a generic, I'd either be able to tell everybody, or I'd be making a massive amount of money because I would be the only person in the world that'd be able to tell you that. So if you go and do a 2-hour steady ride, how long does it take to recover from a 2-hour steady ride? I've got no idea. Through trial and error, through the guys that I coach, through looking at their heart rate responses, from getting their feedback, I get a much better response of how they're coping. Now, in theory, we would suggest an 18-year-old should respond and should bounce back from that training session much quicker than a 48-year-old and much quicker than an 88-year-old. But in practice, that doesn't happen. As I say, I've got people like the gentleman that was with me today as a mid-60s athlete that does more training and responds faster than some of my 24-year-old athletes that I'm looking after. Everybody is different. Everybody is unique. And so we've got to look at training principles, we've got to look at recovery principles, we've got to look at nutrition principles, and then factors which I don't work with. And I say to you, right, let's find a reputable strength and conditioning specialist to work with you. Let's find somebody that can look at, and this is more along the lines of a physiotherapist, that can look at your flexibility and look at your mobility, look at your muscle imbalances and say, this is tight here, this isn't great there. What can we do to improve? So again, it's almost about doing that MOT and looking at your strengths and weaknesses. Now, I'm very aware that I've been talking far too much. So what we've got to remember is age is a number. And everybody is different. Everybody is unique. Everybody is an individual, okay? And one size does not fit all. But as you can see by Pixie here, she's got her shoes on the wrong feet, or my shoes on the wrong feet, and she's put her helmet on backwards. So often, experience overcomes youth. So don't be put off by you thinking, I'm getting up a little, I'm getting that little bit old. So we've got to be very, very aware of that. Okay, so in a nutshell, simple steps, regardless of whether you're 18 or 80, identify your fitness needs, set your objective goals, target your training adaptations with specific training. We can help with that. Design that training regime for you that's got overload and recovery, but keep it interesting and keep it challenging. And then again, come back to us to objectively evaluate progress. Karen, I'll come on to that question in a moment. So what can we do for you? Training books, if you haven't got them, give us a shout. We've got a couple in stock, so give us a shout for a training book. We are testing. Oh, thank you very much. So the lab is now open. I am fairly full and fairly hectic before I go away in 2.5 weeks' time. 3 weeks' time, actually. I'm looking at my diary. I think we go away in 3 weeks' time. I am almost at 100% capacity, but I've got a couple of slots still available. I'm not opening my diary to all and sundry at this point. So if you would like an appointment, and my other computer has just suddenly gone mad. If you'd like an appointment, please email us. Please get in touch to book directly with us for a test. Joe's just posted a link if you want to have a consultation with me. Again, have a 20-minute, 30-minute consultation with me to pre-book a test and find out what we can give you. Please follow the portal link. We can have a training program designed specific to you, specific to what we need. Coaching, of course, and then thank you very much. Now I'm going to go back 3 slides because on here I just want to say to you, we're going to have to put our prices up. Our prices will be going up from the 1st of September. I'm just calculating what the price increase sadly needs to be, and that's basically because I've lost income for 4 months. And I've got to pay a bit of catch up, and things like PPE and all of those stuff have meant my overheads have also gone up. So as of the 1st of September, there will be a price increase. If anyone books, you can book for January next year if you want, but if you book prior to the 1st of September, we will keep the current pricing structure for you. So I'll flick through those again. So sorry to finish off with that. Right, so as Joe's pointed out, have a quick flick over to portal.sportstest.co.uk. Through the portal at the moment, you will be able to book a consultation with me to chat about your training and to book an appointment. If you just want to book an appointment and you know you want to book an appointment, you don't need to speak to me, just drop me an email. Use that to contact us again and say, please, I want a test date. And I will try. I've ended up phoning people back at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. Or use office@sportstest.co.uk. If you thought tonight was useful, pop over to coffee, that's ko-fi.com/sportstest, and be very, very kind and buy me a coffee. And hopefully that's given you lots to think about. Now, questions, please. Now, Karen started off with a B, and I want to put my head in the sand, Karen, as I like to, with ladies' issues. And Karen said, what about women of a certain age? Everybody's different, Karen, and we are, as you know, having to follow that, probably use the completely wrong terminology, touchy-feely response that I use in, right, we prod things and we see how you respond. You know, we adapt things, we see how you respond. You know, with the guys that I coach, as you know, at that high level, if something is not going right in the week, we can manipulate, we can change, we can mold things to where you're able to cope. And so from that high level coaching point of view, I take my test data, which is our baseline. It gives us the understanding of what we need to do, and then we're able to modify. And that at the moment is probably, and I want to sadly say, my limited experience of being able to assist ladies of a certain age. Anyone else out there? I don't know, is anyone still online? Oh, we've still got a few people online here, and I'm just going to pull up my Q&A thing. Right, okay, let's cancel that. Let's start that or type an answer. Right, okay. Any other questions for me tonight? Or have I bored you all? No, here we go. Is there any risk of exercising with age? We've heard, right, okay. Right, Charlie, and it, you know, the issue here is, I think, so Charlie's just asked, and I'm not sure if you guys see these questions, so certainly I think we've got the streaming on Facebook tonight as well. Is there any risk of exercising with age? So at this point here, and this is where I hope that people like James Gill were online, and I don't think James is tonight. And at this point, I usually go, right, we need a medical opinion on this. From my point of view, one of the basic risk classifications that we do to start with is, are you overweight? Are you a smoker? Are you a drinker? Are you exercising actively? And if you've got those four things that are reducing risk factors down, so, you know, you're not necessarily, you might be carrying more weight than you want to, but you're not massively overweight, great stuff. You don't smoke, which most of my athletes coming in to see me don't. You maybe drink, but not excessively, and you train regularly. Those are all going to diminish the risk of exercise with age. Now, you know, sudden cardiac death can happen at any age. And more often than not, where we hear athletes dying at the roadside, it's usually there's an underlying condition that hasn't been predisposed. I've got one of my gentlemen, I don't think he was online tonight, and every time, and I haven't spoken to Hugh in a little while, so I hope he's okay. Had a very, very nasty incident, and to this day he says I saved his life, and I don't think I did. I just basically picked up the phone and phoned an ambulance, and yes, it effectively saved his life. But he had a long-term genetic defect that meant he had a heart condition. Now, because he was fit, that had been masked. So I would just say to you, if you are experiencing any circumstances, any situations where you think you're at risk, once we've hit that age of 50, you need to be, the dogs are just starting to be silly. Once you've hit that age of 50, go and bang on the GP surgery door and say, I want a Wellman assessment. I feel I'm fit and I'm healthy, but, you know, can you check my blood pressure? Can you check my cholesterol levels? Can I get an ECG? Can I check that I'm all right? Can you check that I'm good and safe to exercise? And that really is the GP's response. And I think typical blokes are, we put our head in our sand and we carry on. and this is this is not sexist, but this is more of a bloke problem than a female problem. Again, what you need to do is you also need to look, and generally we find it passes down the male line. So if there's a history of heart disease in your family, if there's a history of high blood pressure in your family, and that's on the paternal line, so it's father, grandfather, uncle, get yourself down the GP, private clinic, wherever it might be, and get yourself checked out. So the risk of exercising with age is, if you're starting out not having done anything, slightly different, and we need to build in slowly and sensibly, as opposed to just going hell for leather at it. And I think that's the problem. That, again, there's a bloke problem rather than a woman's problem. Women's problem, women tend to take these things far more sensibly, and they, not all the time, but usually take things with far more advice. Right, Gordon has just poked in the chat. I've done something silly again. Right, okay. Gordon, how many hard sessions a week should we be looking at, or sweet spot sessions? Gordon, again, as a rule of thumb, depends on who you are. I don't know who you are, and I don't like rules of thumb, but if I'm going to go rule of thumb, 2 per week. That would be a sensible strategy. But again, it depends for me of where you are in your training plan, how good your cardiovascular endurance is, how good your top end is, all of those things. So I would be looking generally at 2 harder sessions per week, sweet spot, threshold type sessions, or 1 sweet spot, 1 threshold session, and 1 really, really high intensity session where you're doing maybe 10-second efforts with longer recoveries. But again, as Charlie just picked out, if you've not done these sort of things before, you don't go plowing headlong into it. So we build you up to that. So hopefully that's helped you out with that. I have now been going for probably, I think, 1 hour and 3 minutes or so. So if there aren't any more questions, the dogs are getting bored. I'm sure you must be. There are still a good few number of people on board. Jane. Jane says, why do we need a longer warm-up to get going in speed sessions when you're older, and what are the physiological reasons she finds she needs? So Jane, I would put that down to, and if you spotted, and I'm sure you did, the slide that says the fast twitch muscle fibers from the age of about 30 to 40 start diminishing really quite rapidly. That's the bit that gets you going. So it's almost like we've got to sort of grease the wheel a little bit more, because we're now reliant slightly more on the slower twitch fibers to get firing up, and bring in the oxygen capacity to get us moving. So in my mind, that's what's going on there. Okay, so as I was saying, I'm about to wind this up. Thank you again for all of your attention this evening. I hope you found it useful. If you have, head over to coffee. If you'd like to come and see me for a test, I can now test. Either email office@sportstest.co.uk, or email us via the portal.sportstest.co.uk. Or if you want to chat to find out that it's right for you, that you're worried you might keel over, or you've got some other thing else you want to talk to us about, feel free to book a consultation with me. I've got a little bit of time, and I need to just double check my diary. I've got a bit of time this I'm going to say this Friday, so in 2 days' time, and a little bit of time next Monday. But after that, things start getting really pretty hectic again. So great to see you all tonight. Thank you very, very, very much for your time and attention, and have a great season. And hopefully we will be back to normal soon, and we'll all be racing, and we'll all see each other at races in the not too distant future. Cheers all. Bye now.